One big question facing the New York Islanders as training camp opens up is whether Matthew Schaefer should play with the Islanders or go back to juniors. We'll discuss where he should play and how it'll impact the team, both short-term and long-term, next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show. We'll start with Matthew Schaefer. Should he play this year in the NHL, or is it better for him to head back to juniors? We'll discuss the impact of both possibilities. Plus, who are the Islanders' biggest rivals outside the Metropolitan Division? And the New York Islanders, well represented at the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame's class of 2025, will break down 3 former Islanders who are getting inducted and their legacies with the team. Got to start, though, with the big question. It is going to be one of the biggest questions facing the Islanders throughout training camp, and it probably will carry over to the regular season. And that is whether or not first overall pick Matthew Schaefer should be playing this season in the NHL with the Islanders, or whether or not he should be heading back to juniors, back to Erie, for 1 more year. And look, as we air this episode today, September 5th, is the 18th birthday of Matthew Schaefer. So he's not our Islanders' birthday of the day because he hasn't played a game for the team yet. But happy 18th birthday to Matthew Schaefer. He is now legally an adult and now faces this dilemma. And the dilemma really belongs to Patrick Roy and Mathieu Darche. Let's face that. There are benefits to both situations. And to me, the guiding underlying question has to be, what is in the long-term interests of Matthew Schaefer? And when I say long-term, I mean what helps Matthew Schaefer develop into a better NHL defenseman in the long term, as quickly as possible. And, this is still a retool year for the New York Islanders. Everydayers, we talk all the time about under Lou Lamoriello, the Islanders were stuck in the muddy middle where if everything broke right, they barely made the playoffs. If it didn't, they missed the playoffs. That's been true for the last 4 years, a little more even. But let's safely say for the last 4 seasons, the Islanders either barely made or barely missed the playoffs and got eliminated in the first round. So while Mathieu Darche has done a very good job of restocking the prospect pool, and we talked about that on Wednesday's show, it's going to take time to move on from some of these aging veterans, many of whom have either bad contracts or no trade clauses. The retool is going to take time because Lou Lamoriello left this team in a bit of a mess as far as the muddy middle is concerned. And I think this year, expectations are more or less the same. Either you just make or just miss the playoffs. Now, injuries and a few guys having bad seasons, yeah, could this team bottom out? Yeah, it's possible. But realistically speaking, when you include the talent, the injury history, the weakness of the Metropolitan Division, the Islanders are probably going to, again, be somewhere between 7th and 12th in the Eastern Conference and either just make or just miss the playoffs. Matthew Darsh, when he took over as GM, talked about building a perennial cup contender. That's still 2, 3, maybe even 4 years away from being realized. And so I am not concerned about Matthew Schaefer contributing or not contributing this year as far as wins and losses are concerned. I'm more concerned about what benefits Matthew Schaefer. And I think the answer would have been easy if Schaefer wasn't injured last year. The fact that he played only 17 games in juniors before the injury, and yes, he had 22 points in those 17 games, was a plus 21 in those 17 games. But 17 games tells me that, if he would have played a full season with Erie, I think it would be much easier to say, you know what? He's got nothing left to prove, nothing left to gain by going back to the OHL. Let him come up to the NHL and struggle a little bit. But ultimately, what has to be determined, what ultimately has to be figured out, is what helps Schaefer develop. If he plays in the NHL, he's most likely going to play second power play and third defense pair minutes. And so, is his development helped more by playing 15, 16 minutes a game in the NHL or playing 28 minutes a game in Erie? In Erie, he'll probably be first power play, be on the PK, log all the most important minutes for his team. With the Islanders, he will most likely not be doing that. He will most likely be, playing a lot less, not as much in key, situations. Safe to say, if the Islanders are clinging to a 1-goal lead, the odds are slim that the first player they're going to want out on the ice is Matthew Schaefer. If the Islanders are down by a goal late in the game, initially, I don't think Schaefer necessarily sees the ice. Maybe he plays well enough to change that by mid-season or late in the season. So what benefits Matthew Schaefer more? And I think if I'm the New York Islanders, I take the maximum amount of time to get my answer to that question. You got 6 preseason games. You got training camp, 6 preseason games, and then up to 9 regular season games before you have to either burn a year of his salary or send him back down to juniors and not have the first year of his entry-level contract toll. If he shows he's good enough in training camp, in the preseason, in the 8-9 game trial that he'll get in October, maybe even into early November, if he shows he's good enough to play in the NHL against grown men and can handle the speed, the physicality, the size of NHL players and still be effective, let him stay with the New York Islanders. If he and trust me, he's going to make his share of mistakes. He is going, like any young player, to try something that worked for him in every level of hockey, in juniors, in even at the WJC, World Junior Championships. He's going to try some moves, and it's not going to work, even though in the past, throughout his hockey career, it worked, 85% of the time. How quickly he adjusts, how quickly he shows he's ready has to be the determining factor. I know there are some people out there, and they've expressed their opinions in comments on YouTube and on, X and in emails. Hey, this guy's the first overall pick in the NHL draft. He should be in the NHL playing full time. I don't want to rush this kid. I don't think whether Matthew Schaefer is on the Islanders this year or not is going to make or break the season for the New York Islanders. The more important thing is 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what plan helps Matthew Schaefer have a bigger impact sooner? I think we have to see how he does. But my inclination is, if he's ready, you let him stay. But if he's not, don't hesitate. It's not like if Matthew Schaefer plays 7 games in the NHL this year and the rest of the season at Erie, he's a failure. No. An 18-year-old kid, especially a defenseman, may need time to develop into a good player. So let him have it if he needs it. Bring him along slowly. Don't let his confidence get killed. I believe in this kid. He's mature. He works hard. He has a good head on his shoulders. Let him go. Let him grow at his own pace. And when he's ready, let him play for the New York Islanders. But until then, don't hesitate, if need be, to send him back to juniors. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk about who the Islanders' biggest rivals are outside the Metropolitan Division. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Maybe you like player props. Maybe you like building a same-game parlay to win even more. Or maybe you like jumping in live as the action unfolds to make the game even more exciting. Whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, FanDuel can heighten the excitement. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel.com to get started. Check it out today. Look, I think it's easy to talk about who the Islanders' biggest rivals are. You start with the locals, the Rangers, the Devils, the Flyers, your in-division team. Carolina definitely comes to mind. But who are the Islanders' biggest rivals outside the division? And I'm interested in getting your feedback. So we will ask about that. But I think there are two obvious answers and then a lot of questions. The first obvious rival outside the division to me is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think there's an easy answer as to why. I'll say it in 2 words: John Tavares. And again, I don't begrudge John Tavares wanting to go back and play for his boyhood favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. If that's what he wanted to do, go do it. But I think what most Islander fans to this day resent is that John Tavares wasn't honest about it. And had he told Garth Snow at the trade deadline, hey, I want to test the market. I think I want to sign elsewhere. The Islanders could have traded Tavares, gotten something substantial in return, and we don't know what kind of an impact that first-round pick could have had. You could have kept it and chosen a player, could have traded it for an established player, which sounds like something Lou Lamoriello might have done, as he took over after that season was completed. But either way, whether you make a pick, whether you trade that pick, whatever it is, it would have had an impact by now, one way or the other, on the Islanders. And look, anytime John Tavares touches the puck, fans at Islander home games are going to boo him. And I get it. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's time to let go. Look, I let go a while ago. Like I said, I don't begrudge him the desire to go back and play for the Maple Leafs. But at the same time, the way he handled it leaves a really bad taste in Islander fans' mouths. And as long as Tavares is playing for the Maple Leafs, I think Toronto will be one of the Islanders' biggest out-of-division rivalries from a fan perspective. The next biggest rival, I think, out of the division would have to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's the team that ended the last two long playoff runs by the Islanders in 2020 and 2021 in the conference final, 6 and 7 game battles that went down to the wire. And I don't think that this Lightning rivalry is one where, Islander fans have this deep hatred of the Lightning, the way they do of the Rangers or of the, John Tavares or what have you. But I think that, losing twice in a hard-fought, well-played playoff series in back-to-back years when you're this close to your first berth in the Stanley Cup Finals since 1984 is frustrating as heck for New York Islander fans. And rightfully so. And so, you add sort of some parallels. The Islanders could have had Victor Hedman. They took John Tavares. I think, the Vasilevsky versus Sorokin battle is an interesting one, as you got the two great Russian goalies going head-to-head against each other. But I think more than anything, it's those back-to-back playoff losses in 2020 and 2021 that really made this a frustrating thing for most Islander fans. And so after the Maple Leafs, I think the Tampa Bay Lightning are next on that list. But I had a little difficulty trying to figure out a third team. I had two candidates that I'm putting out there. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comment section here. But, do you go with the Colorado Avalanche because you've got now Brock Nelson, Devon Taves? That is one possibility. I think the Canadiens could be another possibility, especially now with Noah Dobson in Montreal after Dauber clearly let it be. He didn't come out and say, I want off the island, but he didn't have to say it. I think he sort of wanted to go. And I think a lot of people understand that was what he wanted over the course of this offseason. So maybe Montreal, maybe Colorado. I don't think there are too many teams in the Western Conference where there's just this hate relationship between Islander fans and those other teams. You only play them twice a year. The Islanders haven't been in the Stanley Cup Final, like I said, since 1984. So you're not facing any of those teams in the playoffs. You know, you're not going to hate the Anaheim Ducks because you play them twice a year. I think it's kind of open for the third if I was to make a top three. So I think Toronto and Tampa Bay are the easy two, but, you know, the third choice is up in the air. We're going to put a poll up on our YouTube page so you can vote on this. But as of right now, I'm going to, you know, leave it up to you guys, and we'll see next week what the poll results are, and we'll talk about it when the time comes, when we get those results. But those are my top two. The third one, up in the air. Let's hear from you, the fan, in the comment section and in the poll here on YouTube. So let us know what you think, and it'll be interesting. Again, cannot be a Metropolitan Division team. You could go anyone in the other three divisions in the league. We've got more to get to on today's show. The U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame's class, very Islanders-centric. We'll talk about that. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, a player who finished his NHL career with the Islanders and later became their general manager, but he's better known as a Ranger. We'll talk about him and his impact on the team coming up next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame announced their class of 2025. And, you know, this is good stuff. And three of the people on this list have solid Islander connections. It's a class of 5 people. You have Tara Muncy, you have Joe Pavelski, and then 3 Islander-related people. Now, the induction will actually take place on December 10th in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is where the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame is located. But the other 3 people on the list all had ties to the New York Islanders. Let's start with the non-player, and that is photographer Bruce Bennett, who worked, you know, covered a lot of games throughout the NHL, but had an emphasis in the New York area, especially with the New York Islanders. So that was really great to see. And I have spoken to Bruce Bennett and seen him at many games. He's a very, very nice guy, very good at what he does. And congratulations to Bruce Bennett for a well-deserved honor. I mean, he's been covering the NHL since the 70s, really. Got to photograph the Islanders' dynasty years. Great picture, one of his best pictures, and there are many. But one memorable picture is Mike Bossy holding his stick, and the stick is on fire. And I just think it is an absolutely great original photograph. Congratulations to Bruce Bennett. The next guy with Islander ties to be selected for the class of 2025, Scott Gomez, who is much better known as a New Jersey Devil player, won a couple of cups there, but he was also an assistant coach with the Islanders in 2017, 2018. He was behind the bench that year. You know, had a great regular NHL career with the Devils, and being one of Lou Lamoriello's people, Lou brought him in as an assistant coach, and he filled a few other roles in the organization before leaving. And then the final member, who is not only a former Islanders player, but a legacy, is Zach Parise. Last 2 years of his career, 36 goals and 69 points in those 2 years, spent with the Islanders, helped them reach the playoffs in 2022 and 2023. Also won a cup with the Devils in, or at least got to the final, didn't win, but got to the final with the Devils in 2012. And of course, his dad, J.P. Parise, a member of the Islanders, in that magical 1974-75 season. So 3 of the 5 inductees in this year's Hall of Fame class, all members of or related to the New York Islanders, and they're all very deserving. So to Bruce Bennett and to Zach Parise and to Scott Gomez, congratulations, and a well-deserved honor that you have all been inducted into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame. And we'll talk more about that when the actual time for induction comes. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And, well, for this one, I think it's pretty easy. But today is the 67th birthday of former Islanders winger Don Maloney, the Lindsay, Ontario native, a second-round pick of the Rangers in 1978, came up the second half of the year with the Rangers, helped them get to the Stanley Cup final in 1979, briefly played for the Whalers for 21 games, and then finished his career with 2 seasons on the island in 89-90, when he had 16 goals and 43 points in 79 games, and 90-91 when he only played in 12 games. Later became the general manager of the Islanders, and, mixed results, let's say that nicely, under Don Maloney's tenure. He could dig in the corners. He was a steady 20-goal scorer early in his career, kind of became more of a checker later in his career. By the time he joined the Islanders, that was more or less his role. One of his better games with the Islanders, how about November 4th, 1989, Islanders hosting the Red Wings at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Glenn Hanlon, the goalie for Detroit, Glenn Healy, the goalie for the Islanders. And after a scoreless first period, Detroit goes up 1-0, and the Islanders end up shorthanded. And believe it or not, they get a goal with Gary Nyland in the box for interference. Don Maloney and Mark Bergevin set up Pat LaFontaine for a shorty that ties the game at 1-1. Later in the period, about 2.5 minutes later, Don Maloney scores his first goal of the game and his first goal of the season. Pat LaFontaine, the lone assist. That makes the score 2-1 in favor of the Islanders. In the third period, Don Maloney and Mikko Makela set up LaFontaine again. That made it 3-1 Islanders. The Islanders go on to win by a score of 3-2. 30 saves for Healy to get the win, but for Don Maloney, a goal, 2 assists. He's a +3. He had 5 shots on goal, which did lead the Islanders in this game. And in a 3-2 win, he contributed to all 3 goals that the Islanders scored. So Don Maloney, former Islanders winger and former GM of the Islanders, he is our Islanders birthday of the day. Wanted to share a little story about Don Maloney when I interviewed him for my book, Ice Wars. Asked him about the controversial game-tying goal in the final minute of Game 5 of the best-of-5 series in 1984 between the Islanders and the Rangers. Maloney tied it with less than a minute to go on a goal that Islander fans will tell you to this day was a high stick and probably should not have counted. And I asked him, was it a good goal? And he said, well, it depends who asks. If it's a Ranger fan, I say, yeah, it was a good goal. If it was an Islander fan, I kind of say, no comment. So Don Maloney trying to kind of play it both ways, but a cute interview, and appreciated his candor when I was working on my book. So Don Maloney is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no off season. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR vs NYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and it's always great to talk Islanders hockey with you anytime. Everydayers, we're back on Monday. Monday, we go back to 5 shows a week. Training camps are opening up. The season is just around the corner. We'll have it all covered for you here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. So we're back to 5 days a week on Monday. Make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.